It's round 2 of the Fide Grand Swiss, and Fabiano Caruana is playing again with Hans Niemann. And only 11 days ago, they just faced each other in the US Championships. Now, on another continent, on the Isle of Man, they are playing each other again with reversed colors. Fabiano is playing with the white pieces, and the big question is he able to win this game? If that happens, he's breaking into the 2800 club again. It's something he has already done before. His all-time high is 2851, so he's familiar with the feeling how to get 2800. But it's something very special. It's a big game, but on the other hand, Hans is playing with black, and is he able to take revenge from that upset that he lost with the white pieces and throw away his winning chances of becoming US champion? We all know what happened. If you haven't seen that game, just make sure to check out that video and subscribe to the channel. Now we are going to see what happened in the game played on the Isle of Man. It's e4, e5. Fabiano plays the Spanish opening, bishop b5, and we have the Berlin defense, but it becomes very interesting. d3, protecting the pawn, bishop c5, and now Fabi goes for the first imbalance. Bishop takes c6, d takes c6, and he played the move h3. It's not the most common move, but definitely it's a solid way of continuing, avoiding any kind of knight g4 ideas that the pawn on f2 will not be targeted by these two pieces. And now black defends the pawn. Knight d7, knight c3. This may look strange, but it's all well-known theory. And white is offering the exchange of bishops, hoping that if black is gonna take, you got an half-open f-file to work with. So after castling kingside, there are some sort of attacking chances with that rook and the knights coming around to the king side. Something like this is very typical for a lot of e4, e5 openings. Not only the Berlin, also the Italian opening, for instance. So Hans is not interested in going for the exchange of bishops, keeps the bishop on the board. White castled, black played rook e8 with the idea that now white moves the knight away from f3 to d2. It's on its way to c4, and black does the same. It's a relatively closed position, so both sides have time to improve their pieces. The knight comes to f8. So the bishop can be free, the knight can come in either to e6 or g6, knight c4, and now the knight went to g6 indeed. An interesting thing is that Fabiano has already experience with this particular position. Back in 2015, he played this position with the white pieces in a game against Levon Aronian, and there he went for the move a4, grabbing space on the queen side, but now he goes for a much more direct option as he played the move d4. And now white is about to open the center, and you would think black has the bishop pair, that should be good for him. But after e takes d4, the idea is probably just to take on d6 first. And if you take back, you take with the queen. Well, white is a little bit better thanks to a nice pawn structure. Black has a doubled pawn. And, well, of course, you could take with the pawn on d4, but then there are various options. You can take with the bishop or just with the queen, and there's a bit of pressure against the pawn on d6. So I think that was Fabi's his idea, but Hans goes for the move bishop e6. He attacks the knight on c4 right away. So knight takes d6, c takes d6 is played, and it looks like black is absolutely okay at this point, because it's a symmetrical structure, no more imbalance. Well, you have opposite colored bishops, so potentially this could be interesting. But what is white going to do? There's basically no problem for black. If you take on e5, d takes e5, it will just be a symmetrical position. There's not much white can do on the d file. So Fabi instead played here the move d5. And that's an interesting move because he is attacking the bishop, and after c takes d5, white takes with a knight, and at least you have a nice square for your knight on d5. Of course, black is able to challenge it, can take it with the bishop. Maybe the knight can come back to e7 at some point. But this is very interesting, because what should black do? Well, if black would think about his own attacking ideas, maybe he would even consider bringing the queen to h4. That could be a nice plan, with sometimes ideas of getting the knight to f4, for instance. But the problem is with this move, there's knight c7. So this is a knight fork, white is winning the exchange. So let's take it back. I think a nice move here for black is to go for the move rook c8. As you're controlling the c7 knight fork. The rook is fantastically placed on the half open file. And what are you going to play here as white? Well, you better don't take the pawn on a7. This is a poisoned pawn. Bishop takes d5. If you take back b6 and the bishop is kind of trapped. We all know this famous Bobby Fischer game against Spassky, the World Championship match in Reykjavik 1972. This bishop will be gone. So that is not good. Rook c8 looks like you're absolutely okay, and the lines we have seen there are absolutely not forced. But black is about to get its queen to h4, and that's something you really would like to do here. Because with the queen on h4, there are plans even to sacrifice on h3, to take with the queen. The knight can come in. I think this is something you would definitely like to see in the game happening for black. But Hans did it different. He played the move queen d7. So the queen is keeping the c7 square controlled. Maybe bishop takes h3 is an idea, but the queen comes to d3. And now all these sacrifices on h3, they're never going to work. If black were allowed to make a move, he would go knight h4 with mating threats, queen g2, knight f3 for instance. But thanks to the queen on d3, white can clear the third rank, offer the exchange of queens, and the queen can always block on g3. So that's something FABI had seen, of course. Queen d3 is an excellent response. And still, I think black may consider a move like rook c8. That looks absolutely acceptable for black. But in the game, they followed bishop takes d5. And I think this is a big positional concession. Black was not in a rush to get rid of that piece. Now after queen takes d5, we have an open position with a bishop versus a knight. And I think the bishop can never be worse than a knight in such position. Black's idea was very concrete. He attacks the queen. The queen goes back, and now Hans wants to get rid of its backward pawn and play the move d5. E takes d5. Queen takes d5 was played. So now, of course, if you go for the exchange of queens, open position, but the knight is active and has possibilities of trading itself for the bishop on e3. Now, it's not a tempo game, but you want to let black take your queen. So you go rook fd1. If black takes the queen on d3, rook takes d3, then white has the open file, is ready to double, and it's very difficult for black to contest the open file because the pawn on a7 will always be vulnerable. Therefore, instead, after rook fd1, rook ed8 played, and now white decides to keep queens on the board. That's a remarkable change, but rook is attacking the queen. The queen went away to a5, probably with the idea that the queen keeps the pawn on a7 protected. At the same time, the queen also keeps an eye on the pawn on a2, so that both the rook on a1 and the rook on a8, they have some sort of temporal defensive duty. But white goes queen g4. This is a very interesting moment, because with the queen on g4, there are various ideas, including bishop h6 could be considered any time. And, well, black can still probably neutralize these threats with knight g6. It's a good way to stop the mating threat. But if you play a random move like a6, even something like rook d7 is in the air, because the queen covers this square. The rook attacks everything on the 7th rank, and you don't want to give up the file that easily. What should black do now? Come back with the queen to c7. I think it's very important to centralize the queen, to keep the knight defended, and bishop h6, threatening checkmate on g7. The bishop cannot be taken because of the pin, but black can respond with the move knight to g6. Bishop will have to go again. So here we see that with the queen on c7, the queen not only protects the knight, but it also guards the d7 square. Look what Hans played in the game. He played a move queen to a6. It's a decentralization of the queen, and it's a serious mistake, allowing white to take on d8. And that's probably Hans had just forgotten about or not taken seriously, because after rook takes, rook d1, white is about to seize control over the open file. Of course, he's threatening to give checkmate. If you take on d1, queen takes d1, the queen is threatening checkmate. Black got to do something about it. If you move the knight away, for instance, to c6 to guard the d8 square, the queen will come into d7. This was all not played in the game, but it's an illustration of how badly the queen is placed on a6. Because if you create an escape square for your king, it's bishop h6. And on the next move, it's queen e8 with checkmate. The bishop covers the g7 square. The alternative is to play h6, but then it's at least queen e8 check. King has to go to h7. Queen takes f7. White has won a pawn. And look, the queen is even defending the pawn on a2. So black cannot take that pawn on a2. White is a big pawn up and will probably win the game. So there's a big problem. You cannot really exchange rooks at this point. You can go away with your rook. But for instance, if you play something like rook e8, the queen will come in to d7, attacking the rook if you protect it with queen c6. Now the big move is bishop c5, guys. Putting pressure on this knight, and well, you're ready to win one of these pawns on the queen side. It's a very, very unpleasant position. Just in a few moves, black has given up the control over the key file, the open file, the d file, which is white occupying now. So a lot of problems in the game. Black played horrible move, rook a8. Horrible in the sense that it's not the worst move in the position, but it's definitely not the move you want to play here as black. Rook comes into d7. That's an excellent move. I should point out that the rook cannot protect the knight because of rook takes e7, deflection motive, and the queen comes in to c8 with back rank mate. So that's not possible. If the knight goes to c6, then it's bishop h6 with again a mating threat. And if you stop the mating threat, then the queen will come in to f6 with a mating threat on g7. If you control the f6 square by moving the knight to d4, then you're surrendering the control over the d8 square. And white is just giving checkmate with queen and bishop. Beautiful mating attack by white. So you understand that the knight went over to the king's side. That's very understandable, but then it's queen f3 with an attack against the pawn on f7. And if you take there, it's going to be checkmate on g7 as well. You're attacking the pawn on b7 also. Queen takes a2. Black is grabbing a pawn and the queen defends the pawn on f7, but white has b3 interference motive. So white renews the threat of taking on f7. You cannot protect with your rook that pawn because it runs into bishop c5. And the rook will have to move, and it's just a material gain for white. So black had to go for the very sad move, knight h8. The knight is totally misplaced there in the corner. Never plays knights in the corner. They are completely useless. And, well, white wins the pawn back, takes on b7, attacks the rook. Rook went to e8, queen c6, you're protecting the pawn. But practically white is playing with an extra bishop thanks to that. Well, the bishop versus knight. Look at the difference. Queen c6 is a great move. After h6, black is making some luft for its king. There is rook takes a7. You're attacking the queen, attacking the rook. So queen to b1, king h2. The rook went to f8. And now queen c4. Excellent centralization. This is the difference. White's pieces are working together and, well, black's pieces, one knight is in the corner, the queen is on the other side. That's just not looking good. Rook d8, and now it's time to advance your connected passed pawns. For instance, if you try to come in with your rook to d1, it's rook a8 check, king h7, queen c8. Look at that knight, it cannot go anywhere. It's just there to be taken. And if the knight comes into g6, it's queen g8 with checkmate. You don't have to play knight g6, but then you lose the knight. And note, of course, that rook h1, king g3 is just one check, and then it's just game over. So the counterattack totally backfires. Black played the move rook b8, and now c3. White is not in a rush, but step by step, these pawns are coming forward and will distract black's defensive duties on the king side. Rook d8, queen a2, offering the exchange of queens. That would be nice, of course. Queen e4, and now it's time to push the b pawn. King h7, b6, f5 played, looking for counterplay, but white plays the move queen a4. Of course, once again, white is interested in trading off the queens. Queen b1 back, queen h4, attacking the rook, and there is a big threat of taking the pawn on h6, because the pawn on g7 is pinned. The bishop and queen are attacking that pawn on h6. So rook d6 only move, but now the queen comes in with another double attack, hitting the rook and the pawn. Rook g6, queen takes e5. Black's pawn duo has been eliminated. There are no counter threats at all. And very soon the B pawn is going to be decisive. Black resigns. So that means Fabi wins again. Again, after 11 days at the US Championships, he now also wins on the Isle of Man. And he once again breaks into the 2800 club. This is a huge milestone once again in his career. And congratulations on him. But probably we are caring more about that result than he himself, because he's just in the middle of a tournament. There are 9 more rounds to go. And of course, there are qualification spots to be gained at the Isle of Man tournament. Fabi is already in the candidates, but nevertheless, he wants to play a good tournament and, of course, pump up his rating even further. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you would like to see more exciting games of the Isle of Man FIDE Grand Swiss. See you soon. Bye bye.